Continuing the series, investigating instruction manuals, and I thought I'd do one more today. I was gonna stop at three, but I decided I'd reach in and grab one. So I reached in and I pulled out a particularly, I guess you'd call it a big part of my gaming history, and that is Tales of the Abyss. So I know for some players are familiar with the Tales of series. It's one that's evolved over time. It existed back in the SNES and Genesis era and evolved from a 2D live action RPG style game into a 3D instanced action. Well, both of them were instanced, I should say. So 2D instanced real-time action RPG into a 3D instanced real-time action RPG, into what we have now, which is just 3D action RPG. I believe the instanced part has been shed. I'd have to double check. I haven't played the most recent ones, in part because they took away the multiplayer element, which was actually the main reason I played all of the Tales games over the years. The reason why this one is a big part of my gaming history is because this is what my friend group in Redmond when I was at DigiPen. That's what we formed around. Um, I still remember the day. We were in the lunchroom, two of my guys, we were talking, and we were like, "Man, it'd be really cool if we could play through a Tales game with everyone as a character." It's like everyone is a character. It's like, yeah, but we need a multi-tap. And one of the dudes who I didn't know at the time, but he'd become a great and deep friend. Um, he's sitting with his back to the table. He turns like, "I have a multi-tap." They're like, we all looked at him. It was like, "Okay, we got to schedule this." And that was it. So we chose somebody to be the helmsman, who played the main character that walked through everything, and everyone else was their characters. They managed their own growths and everything. And yeah, we had a lot of fun building up our own strategies and everything, and playing it over time. Now, as an instruction manual, I mean, one of the first things we're looking at the outside of this, and immediately we have a number of things that we notice now. Similar to the Soul Calibur manual, this game is mostly focused on advertising itself, which makes sense. Namco didn't have a system to manage, but here's another thing. This game, we can see a note of the era that it came from. This is no longer just a Namco game, this is a Namco Bandai game. This was after the merger. And that's, you could say that that might be a part of the reason why all of the, why it's got more of that anime feel to it, because Bandai was definitely much more an anime company, and Namco was more in that, what would you call it, animated realism kind of space. Because I mean, Tekken is very realistic in its view, but if you actually really look at the stylization, you realize the characters are exaggerated realism with this, that, and the other thing to make them unique and interesting. Either case, yes, this was Tales of, and a couple other things. You know, you got that T for teen on the front, so this was after the ESRB thing. And let's take a look at the back. Again, this was another thing, and again, and we saw that with the previous Namco instruction manual, an advertisement on the back. This one for Xenosaga, which I never actually got around to playing because I wasn't that big of an RPG guy. I know, sacrilege or whatever. But yeah, advertisement for that on the back. And this one, actually, the advertisement actually mentions, "Hey, this is played on the PlayStation 2. You should, buy it there. Buy a PlayStation or PlayStation 2." Now, with the instruction manual, as of note, the main reason that this is here is to fill in any gaps the person has when they play the game. So of course, it's not necessarily going to tell you go buy this. This belongs to that. This belongs to that console because you already have it. The reason why you have this is because you bought the game. So it's not doing something like the N64 or SNES ones, which is like if you randomly found it somewhere, you'd immediately know what it was played on. So let's go ahead and open this guy up. So of course we have the warning things like, hey, you should read this before you play the game. I don't think anybody ever actually read that before they played the game, but I digress. Warnings about this, that, and the other thing, all that legal stuff. And then you got the table of contents. And one of the things we notice here, so again, it's interesting because we're at a middling point between what we saw in Soul Calibur 3's book and what we saw in Super Mario All Stars, where Super Mario All Stars had a very just blank white, and then they put things on top of it. And Soul Calibur's one had a very deep blue and some imagery on the back of it, imagery in it. So this one, it still keeps it simple and clean, but it has the runic language that shows up in the game, and of course art, the art that's actually on the title bit right here, that title symbol there, which has a thing to do with the phonic magic in the game. Now, of course, we got that starting up and everything. And this one it's keeping a lot of the text short and sweet, and you can very quickly get to everything. And I think one of the parts here is just like, well, this is game controls. Really, when they get into the game, it's going to tell them how to do all of this. This is just here if they need it. But then we get to some of the stuff that I think are really more the focus. Of course, we have the story, and because of the amount of space they have, they keep it kind of short and sweet. They talk about the magic of the world, working off of phonons in like paragraph and like two paragraphs. They also talk about the world creation. Over 2,000 years have passed. Now they talk about how the world was made, and then we have this last bit that talks about the prophecy and our main character, and then we get to the characters. Now, what's of note here is we spend like a page on the story. And a part of that is because while, yes, this is an RPG, so the story is going to be super important, but that's what's in the game. So we're not going to spoil that in here. Rather, we're just going to say, here's your starting point. But one of the big draws for any Tales game are the characters. And so you'll see that there's a little bit more, just enough information to tease you into following along with them, and of course, a really cool art of the character. So, like, you got Luke, Mr. Von Fobre, and you've got Tyr, and you've got Mew. I've never been a fan of the little cutesy mascot characters. I know they serve a purpose, but I did like the fact that he got kicked around like a football. It might be a little bit mean in that. You got Jade Curtis, uh, consistently the favorite character across the group that I played with. We all loved Jade. He was just awesome character. 35 years old, and presented as an old man, which is interesting because I'm 37, and it's kind of like I don't feel like that's all that old, but either case, um, full of wisdom, full of japes, and just smart. You have Anis, honestly, one of the characters we didn't care as much about. Um, Giant stuffed teddy bear that she fought things with. Uh, the awesome guy, as referenced in the game. Yes, he is. He is called the awesome guy. Well, rather, he calls himself that. Um, Another one of our favorite characters, just from the way that they did him, and Natalia, of course. Now, again, it's like they spent one, two. They spent two through four, 4 pages of real estate just on the characters, and then another page of real estate on the strings. And that's important of note because this is one of the big draws of the game. And so it's like, and this is also one of the things like after you play the game, you're going to want to consume some stuff with regards to the characters and stuff, and that's kind of the deal there. So having some cool art of the characters and everything like that. Then we get to some more informational stuff, just like this is how it works and all. um, some in-game screens, and again, it's keeping it very simple and clean, just teaching you this, that, and the other thing. And you'll notice as a difference between this and the Soul Calibur book, there's a little bit more space, just a little bit more space between the individual lines of text, making it a little bit easier to read and just a little less intimidating, just that little bit less intimidating. Of course, also we have the big bars, so you don't have to really hunt too hard to find any particular things. Like, well, I want to talk about the normal map. Well, it's right here. I want to talk about talking to people. Well, that's in the speak and look section. I want to talk about Mew. I don't want to talk about Mew, but yeah. Anyway, the so again, the structure, and of course we've got the in-game screen thing, and point towards, hey, this is the this is what that does. This is the this is what that does. This is the this is what that does. And one interesting thing about, I mean, at least the exercise of making it an instruction manual is because you have limited space. So that means that you have to be concise and you have to be clear about what you're talking about and how it works. And so, from a game development standpoint, there is something to be said for, even if you don't use it externally, making a internal manual for your team so that you can very clearly convey things, because that feeds into your ability to advertise, where you can just basically say the game is like this, it does this and that, and when you're in this situation you do this and this. And when somebody asks you about, well, how do you handle this, I can be like, well, this is how. um, so in that regard, having to build something like this that tells you everything about how the game works is interesting. Now, I should also note, because this is a much more complex game than, say, like Mario, there's a lot more that you have to do textually. But they manage this well by actually using the in-game screens so that you have a jump off point to kind of see what's going on. And again, the game does a lot to teach you these things on its own. And so again, it's kind of the function of these books. This instruction manual in particular is a little bit deprecated at this point, especially since this was also when the internet was really catching on. So really, if you wanted to learn stuff, you could have somebody walk you through it on the YouTube. But it's still interesting to see. Still very interesting to see. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you can do in this game. Some of it that you don't really ever like. Me and my crew, we barely interacted at all with the strategy section, because that's all about the enemy AI, the player AI. And well, to say that the player AI in this game was subpar would be an understatement. We just said, no, we're playing the characters. This is the only way to do this. We have to do it that way, otherwise we're going to get whomped when we go to the secret boss. But yeah, lots of really interesting things here. Again, the structure, again, very simple background structure. For the most part, they keep the blurbs pretty simple, using Times New Roman as their basic text format, which is quick, easy to read, and yeah, lots of in-screen imagery, which is actually different from even the Soul Calibur one. Soul Calibur one didn't use nearly as much in-screen imagery, but again, ultimately a far less complex system that they're dealing with there. Is like you have a bunch of different elemental weaknesses and strengths going on. Some characters cast, and that functions differently than others. Physical attacks have comboing, but they combo in specific ways. You have the field of phonons effect, which was very fun to interact with. And then, of course, super moves, um, and just so much, so much stuff to go over and explain about how the game works. Which, again, the game in game, you can just kind of it presents it to you in game, and I think it's a good thing that it did. Because to be real, I rarely, well, I don't think I ever really opened this up and looked at it in fullness. But there's a whole bunch of information in here. Oh yeah, and at the very back, because generally speaking, they didn't expect people to have multi-tap to play this thing. So of course they're like, oh yeah, yeah, we should note that you can play this game with multiple people. And so it's like playing with 2 players, playing with 3 to 4 players, playing with multiplayers. Um, and that was not expressly simple to do, but it was a thing. Let's see if they mention it. So player one's controller to controller port one. Yeah, because this was a PlayStation 2, remember? So there was only 2 controller ports on that one. And then controller port 2, ports 2A and 2B and 2C in that order. Controller port 2D cannot be used. You cannot connect a multi-tap for PlayStation 2 into controller port 1. When playing with 3 or more players on PlayStation 2, the SCP-PH 70,000, which I think barely anybody even got to this part of the book. Use a multi-tap for PlayStation 2 SCPH 7120. And the average person would be like, what? 70 what? 7 to what? What is this? But yeah, that was the thing. And then of course the credits in the back of the book, which I have my feelings about credits in games. I kind of feel like it's weird that you have to beat the game to see everybody that put their work into it. I feel like it should be just a thing of there's a at the start of the game, at the opening part, you just say, here's a credits button. You can open it up. You can select the different sections. Say, I want to see who did the art for this game. And you select that, and you can go through it and find the lead art director, the different art teams underneath it, and just look at them individually. I think that's better than this long streaming list of people that's going by so fast that you're just like, oh, that person, that person, that person, to give you one context. So after we played Tales of the Abyss and thoroughly beat the crap out of this game, I think we beat it three different times on 3 different difficulties. We played Tales of Symphonia, and I still remember the only name I remember from the end credits was Debbie Derryberry. She was the voice of a dog in the game. And I said to myself, I will forever remember Debbie Derryberry for her grand sacrifice of voicing a dog. Her only line was, and I didn't remember anything else. Not the art directors. Other people would remember the voice actors and everything else. And I think that's in part due to the way it's presented. I think it should be more of a thing of here's your credits button, and then you want to find out everything that went into a character. You know, select the character. Here's everyone that was involved in designing this character's model, doing the color selection for this character, the line work for the character, the original concept art for the character. Here's the voice actor for the character. Here's the voice director. Here's the voice director for the character. Here's the script writer, person who specifically wrote the script. Did they have a separate script writer for this character, or did they have just one person doing just all of that? I think it would be better if it's sectioned, kind of like, well, I'm gonna grab it here real quick. I mean, if it's sectioned, and I mean, again, you can kind of look at this, right? What if you just had this says This said, instead of what it says, which is synopsis, instead of saying synopsis, it said art team. And then underneath that, it had lead artist, support team, editing team. And then you select that and then you go from there. Change it from a scrolling list because that is something that we did in the movies because it was necessary. Change it from a scrolling list into a wiki. Just have a wiki in your game that people can look at. Be like, I love these guys. You know, I mean, if you really want to be savvy to our democratized system of work now, will allow every person that's worked on your team to put their Twitter handle or whatever on there or wherever they present their work and say, you can reach me here. Do you need an artist? This guy did the art for this game. Point them out, you know? But that's my 2 cents on that. Anyway, that was Tales of the Abyss. Like I said, that was a very fond part of my um, college years. I was only in college for like 3 years and I dropped out. Um, it's a fun part of my time, but it was a good time. I really enjoyed it. So again, digging through all of these instruction manuals, you're going to be hearing my life experiences with them because these are logs of the things that I did over time because I didn't have that many friends. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. This has been Redco. Play the games you want to play, Boyos. This is Redco. Signing off.